Hey guys, Mrs. Fox here with part 1 of Unit 7.4, the Reconstruction era ends. So we're going to hit the end of Reconstruction and beyond a little bit. Okay, make sure you've got everything you need for Cornell notes, highlighters, and paper, and something to write with. Remember, I won't always necessarily talk about highlighting that super duper very important purple information, but make sure you do highlight that if you see important info. Also, I might not always address a left-hand side question, but make sure you're getting those left-hand side questions down. They should not be just yes or no questions or easy to answer kind of questions. They should take a minimum worth of a sentence of detail to properly answer whatever left-hand side questions you come up with. So make sure you've got your title down and you're ready to go. Push pause if you need more time because here we go. All right, so Q1, first taste of freedom. Hello, you have an entire population of people, all of the ex-slaves, all of the African Americans in the South, newly freed, that have just had their world turned upside down. And yeah, it's a positive thing, right? They've wanted freedom for a long time. They deserved it. We should have never had slavery in the first place. But now they've got it. And if you think about it for a second, everyone's always so excited about the idea of them becoming free or good for them or finally no more slavery. This is awesome. They forget that when you free a whole group of people like that, there's problems on the other side of freedom too. Okay? So there's racism going on. And there's issues that the African American community is going to have to face. But despite that, for the first time, blacks were able to travel freely. They could look for a lost family thanks to help from the Freedmen's Bureau, right? They could get an education for free, again, thanks to help from the Freedmen's Bureau. They could get married freely without permission to whoever they chose, at least if they were also black, because a lot of times it was illegal to marry a white person. They could look for work and do something different than what they had always done when they were a slave. They had gotten citizenship, right, thanks to the 14th Amendment, and they had voting rights for African American males thanks to the 15th Amendment. So, you know, a lot of things about their first taste of freedom is awesome. They've made a lot of gains. However, think about what just happened to them, guys. Yeah, they were slaves, but they also had free housing, free clothing, free food, free, furniture and tools and utensils. And was that stuff always in the best shape? No. Were they treated nicely? No. But now that they're free, they've lost a lot of those things, right? They don't have housing anymore. All of a sudden, overnight, they're homeless, right? They don't have anything at all. They don't have any money, most of them, or a very limited amount of money if they have any. So they have no possessions, right? They don't have any skills. Most of them had done the same thing their entire life. Most slaves were farming, outdoors, right? They worked on plantations, so they had farming skills, and that's the only thing most of them knew how to really do well. They didn't have educational skills like reading and writing, right? They don't own any property, okay? So all of the sudden their life, where at least they had a house and at least they had possessions and at least they had food, right? That's all been taken away from them. And this is awesome. This is ultimately a step in the right direction because of course they want freedom and this is wonderful, but there are problems they have to figure out because they've gained this freedom. So what is this going to look like exactly? Remember also, this is going to make it really easy for all those racist people in the South, which again, not everybody was, but for the racist people in the South to keep the African American population, keep them down, keep them from rising up because they are starting off with nothing most of the time, right? And as they try to claw and fight their way for political power and claw and fight their way for educational rights and claw and fight their way for, equality, when they're starting at the bottom, it's easy to keep knocking them down when the white people are already, way up here on the rungs of power. And so Southerners use that to their advantage a lot of the time to keep the black person in their place. Super racist and unfortunate. Okay, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page, okay? So you got to find work now, right? You have never had the ability to go out and do whatever you wanted to do. You were just told what to do as a slave, and now you need a job. Okay, well, again, most of them have no skills other than farming. So a lot of them fall back into, well, I'll farm. Okay, well, I don't have any money to travel anywhere. I don't have any other skills. I may be getting educated, but I'm not educated yet, right? And I have really nowhere to go. And so who do I know that needs farm hands? Oh, yeah, my old master, right? Because if all of us up and leave, they're not going to have anybody to do all this work. And so a lot of the freed African Americans ultimately just ended up working at the same plantation they had always worked at, okay? Um, Being mistreated by their former masters, now bosses, and very little really changed for them. Their former masters, now bosses, did everything they could to pretty much, control them the way they used to before slavery ended. So you might get a wage, but it was very low and it was not equal to what a white would make. And, safety conditions and everything were horrific. Okay. One thing that's kind of interesting to note is that from an African American's perspective, think about what they had come from generations, guys, of slavery. To them, in an African American's mind, well, you've always provided housing, you've always provided my clothes, you've always provided food, and now I'm free. So you should continue providing all that and pay me. And if you think about where they're coming from and their background, to them that made sense. But if you think about it logically, no, that's not how it works when you're free, right? When you're free, we pay you now, but we're not going to provide you a house, and we're not going to provide you food, and we're not going to provide you, possessions and things, and clothing. Like, you have to do that by spending the money you're now making to provide yourself with those things. Right? Like, I'm sure none of you, for the most part, there's a few exceptions to this, but most jobs don't give you a house too, and a clothing budget, and, a car, and, pay all your bills for you. Like, you get money for a wage, right? And you have to buy those things yourself when you have a job. And so this confused African Americans and really kept them kind of bound to the land that they had already worked their whole lives, and often had to continue to work for their master. Of course, they're treated horrifically a lot of the time, especially because Southerners are so ticked about all this equality stuff. And because they don't know legal jargon, and they don't necessarily know totally how to read and write yet, and they don't understand interest and legal contracts and stuff, they often, African Americans, were given the short end of the stick, right? Because whites would cheat them out of things without them realizing it was happening. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Make sure you write down a question, highlight, right? Okay, so sharecropping is something that ends up springing up in the South. It starts during Reconstruction and really is pretty ingrained into Southern culture all the way through the 1930s and into the 40s even a little bit. So what is sharecropping? Sharecropping is when a worker rents the plot of land they're going to farm from the owner, and they rent the tools, and they rent the seed, and they rent the housing, right? Because think about it, African Americans don't have money to buy all these things. So pretty much what's happening is they're going to their masters and they're saying, hey, master, I'll stay here and I'll work your farmland for you. But, can you advance me the money I need to pay the rent to live in my house? Can you advance me the money I need to buy the tools I'll need to farm? Can you advance me the money I'm going to need for the seeds I'm going to need to plant things, and all of that kind of stuff. And then at harvest time, once we've had the year of planting and growing up our crops, and it's time to harvest them and go sell our product, right? I'll pay you a share out of that. Sharecropping, right? I'm going to pay a share of my crop, thus sharecropping, to pay you back, master, and then I get to pocket the rest of the money, and hopefully, we'll both make a profit, because you'd have to pay your master back for all of the things you were renting plus interest, right? Because he wants to make money. And then hopefully your crop went for enough that you can do that and pay your master back plus interest, and there'd still be money left over for you to pocket to also make a profit, so you could save away, and after a few years hopefully be able to go buy your own land or buy your own equipment or that kind of thing. Well, sharecropping typically didn't work that way. You never found yourself getting out of poverty because these farmers that were renting from the plantation owners just found themselves in this cycle of debt. Okay. Either it was a bad year for farm crops and they didn't sell as well as they thought, or they had some sort of insect infestation or bad weather or whatever. Or hey, maybe you had a great year farming and you had an awesome harvest with wonderful crops that went for a great profit. The white man that you were, you're borrowing all these things from was going to make sure that they found a way that you owed them money. Okay. They took advantage of the fact that these African Americans don't know how to compound interest. They don't understand how interest works. They don't understand the mathematics of all of that or contract language. They don't often know how to read yet, or are just learning how to read, or only have a basic level of knowledge of reading. And so even if blacks should have ended up ahead that year, they should have been able to pay their rent and pay all the things that they bought from their, the landowner, and given them the interest and been able to pocket money. The white man often would make sure they weren't pocketing money, because they'd say, oh no, interest was actually this, or oh no, remember, you also owe me for this, this, and that, like from 6 months ago, right? And they would just find a reason to keep those people in debt, and it just became this cycle of keeping African Americans poor and dependent on white landowners, and not letting African Americans move up or better their situation for their family or the next generation. So sharecropping was a horrible cycle that in a lot of ways, you guys, was just another form of slavery. Okay, it was like legalized slavery in a lot of ways. In fact, some people even refer to the Reconstruction period where sharecropping is happening as the second Civil War, right? Because, okay, now we won the war, but we actually really in reality need the rights we're, promised, because through a lot of the Reconstruction period, they're not getting those rights in reality, right? There's always pushback and people try to push them back under and prevent them from getting rights. And sharecropping is another way that they're trying to keep African Americans from gaining equality or moving up in the world. Okay. All right. Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Just to show you how much sharecropping was happening, take a look at that map. The darker the pink, the more sharecrop farms were happening. So it is, crazy amounts happening throughout the South of the sharecropping. Again, keeping African Americans dependent on white farmers. To be fair, often in this system, a lot of times the white farmers weren't coming out very much ahead either. And a lot of the plantation systems, the plantation system of life, but before the Civil War, kind of diminishes, and a lot of those plantations go under as white men are suffering a lot of financial setbacks and things too. And in some cases, the sharecropping cycle keeps both the owner of the land and the renter of the land poor. So it just depended on the situation. A lot of the plantations will start to disappear. I suggest you push pause and take a look at this sharecropper cycle. It's going to help you better understand what's happening. You want to understand that to kind of know what's happening in the culture. It's a game changer for them during Reconstruction and beyond. So push pause and take a look at that. Of course, we got some video clips. Make sure you check those out too. All right, Q4, enthusiasm for Reconstruction fades. Like all things, eventually everyone's not gung-ho for it forever, right? Eventually people get over things. And the war ended in 1865. By 1870, all the southern states were legally part of the United States again. And, hey, people are getting tired of battling over Reconstruction. They're tired of all the politics. It's a huge amount of money going out for Freedmen's Bureau and other expenses of military presence in the South and different things. The Democrats, one of the two big political parties in the United States, don't even like Reconstruction and the things that are happening. And Grant is reelected. Remember, Grant's a Republican. He is reelected in 1872 to get a second term. But a year into his second term, there's a huge financial crisis, kind of like a recession that happens. And a lot of Americans start blaming the Republican Party. Some of them blame Grant. And they really start focusing on their own, their own concerns, their own wallets, their own economic situation, and care less about what's going on with Reconstruction. Okay, we'll continue this when I see you guys for part 2. So I will see you then.